I don't like having to do this sort of thing and provide any of this sort of commentary on things because penning and writing and pushing internalized criticism, is not a duty that should ultimately fall to men under, feminist doctrine, but here we are, and I have to make the most of it and to try my best to stay within those boundaries and, provide a criticism of another woman, of a woman's alleged feminism here. And, so my statement about this in preemption would be that this is the story, and I wanted to say about it before we really dive into it that while stories like this are clear exemptions to the laws and statutes that are on the books in states like this, just having exemptions to situations like this on in the law is not sufficient ultimately to get the fear out of doctors, heads, because a lot of them are afraid of screwing up in some kind of way that will allow, a malicious party to, a prosecutor to come after them, regardless of whether they were in what they perceive to be, the statutes of the law, and they want very much so to adhere to it without getting in trouble, and they know only too well that, there is even some of their patients may be malicious and more than willing to run to the police about what they've done, and if they catch wind of this, that there are whisperers that are willing to go to the cops left and right, and so they need to make sure their bases are covered 6 ways from Sunday. So
With the next topic,
you know, so stories like this will continue to happen. I wish I could tell you that I felt that it was just Kylie. Sorry if I've mispronounced your name, Miss. I'm not sure how you pronounce it, and I apologize profusely ahead of time. But stories like this will continue to happen. It's all too often I think that the experience that a lot of them think is that there are times in which people thought they were adhering to the letter of the law and yet still ended up paying for it by being prosecuted despite all of their best intentions. And so this is the reality that happens regardless of whether there are clear exemptions in the law or not. It doesn't really matter. That is not necessarily enough to get doctors to act swiftly as they need to. Whether you believe it or accept it or laugh in the face of it does not ultimately matter. It is not relevant. The truth remains the truth. Whether it is accepted, reality, and objective reality is objective reality, whether you accept it or not. The objective reality is that it is a fact that abortion is healthcare. That you don't like that truth is not relevant. That you don't accept it is not relevant. The truth is the truth. It is not conditional upon your acceptance.
I was sent home with an ectopic pregnancy clearly visible in my ultrasounds. Sent home to let it go off inside of me and internally hemorrhage and potentially die. If I had been given information sooner, then I could have made a decision that could have saved my right tube. Having my symptoms be dismissed, my pain be dismissed, it's unacceptable.
The reason that we believe may be behind this is Texas's abortion bans. It is perfectly legal under Texas law to provide treatment for an ectopic pregnancy. That is a clear exception to Texas's abortion bans. But as long as abortion is banned with criminal penalties, a doctor who provides an abortion in Texas in violation of the ban faces life imprisonment, hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines, and loss of their medical license. As long as abortion is criminalized, doctors are terrified to provide essential health care to their patients.
I was sent home.
And that is ultimately the sad reality. She has suffered a loss, basically, from a catastrophic miscarriage as a consequence of anti-abortion policies. Groups like Collective Shout unfortunately champion these very self-condemned kind of policies that would lead to these adverse outcomes for women all over the world. For these groups to call themselves feminist rings pretty hollow. For women, like, for example, the leader of this particular group, whose name I'm, for my own purposes, I wish I could very easily, just push away from my memory, and I'm having to scroll back through my own history. MTR, as in, Melinda Tankard Reist, and her politics, and the the things that she champions and everything would lead directly to this. Melinda, has another fatal flaw in her feminist politicking, which is to say that the majority of women who get abortions do not ultimately live on to regret the procedure. Only a very extremely tiny minority of them actually suffer mental health impacts. And aside from that, suffering a mental health impact is not a death sentence. It's better that women suffer those mental health impacts than that they bring a child into this world that they are not prepared to bring into this world. That is a small thing that has been inflated into a fucking giant fucking mountain. She has made a mountain out of a molehill on this one issue, and I'm sorry. I know it doesn't sound very extremely friendly to feminism, but we also have to consider the life of the child and how it would be adversely impacted by a woman bringing a child into this world that she was not fully prepared to bring or raise. We have to consider that. And my frustration is that women like this, like the women that are behind, Collective Shout, like Melinda Tankard Reist, they all champion policies like bans on abortion. They think that, and have been one of the biggest pushers of this idea that you can be a pro-life feminist. I disagree.
We should hire you.